In my Father's house, there are many rooms. Brothers and sisters, today, I'd like to invite you to reflect on just that line of the gospel. In my Father's house, there are many rooms. But first, allow me to begin by telling you the story of Pau, which is short for Paulo, the boy who was born in jail. I wrote about him, with his permission, of course, in the book entitled The Gospel of Mercy According to Juan and Juana. He had just finished high school and was going into college when I first met him, of all places, in prison. He wasn't a prisoner. He was then serving as an altar server for my first Friday Mass with the jail inmates. He struck me as a jolly young man, the type who would win in a Mr. Congeniality contest in a school campus if there is such a contest at all. I wouldn't have thought that he was born and raised in the most unusual circumstances if he had not told me his story himself. Well, here's the story. His mother had been arrested, along with his grandmother, for syndicated estafa, a non-bailable case. Right during that year, that the mother happened to be pregnant with Pau, and she gave birth to him in prison a few months later. Now, Pau would have been taken for sheltering by the DSWD, the Department of Social Welfare, as soon as he was born, if his mother had not pleaded to be allowed to at least breastfeed her newborn child for just a few more weeks, as advised by the midwife who had assisted her at the delivery. Now, when the social worker came back a few weeks later, the mother told them that the child had been taken to the province by her close relative, which was, of course, a lie. Even the jail guards and the inmates had cooperated in concocting the story because they had all become very fond of the boy in the meantime. The prison warden himself stood as godfather when Pau was baptized in jail. And so, Paulo grew up in prison. He was the only one inside who had the freedom to move from cell to cell, and the inmates eagerly volunteered to babysit him. He got used to calling them all the male prisoners, daddies and uncles, and all the female inmates, mommies and aunties. And to the great delight of the prison warden, the behavior of the prisoners radically changed because of the presence of Pau. No more gangsterism, no fighting, no cussing, no smoking whenever Pau was around. When the mother and grandmother of Paulo got convicted, there was no way anymore that they could take Pau with them to the Prisión Correccional of the National Bilibid Prison. And so, Paulo had to stay behind in the city jail. And it was a tearful parting. But the whole prison community assured the mother that they would look after Paulo. They even put up a common fund, for the elementary education of Pau. Pau went out every day to a nearby school for his regular schooling, and he returned to the prison after school. He even received special tutoring from some of the better educated prisoners. And that is why he did very well in school, and later he became a scholar. He he was able to finish college, he was able to finish education, and is now a full-fledged teacher in a well-known university. And his mother and grandmother are now free, and now they're living together as family. But he still considers the whole prison community as family. Why am I telling you all this? Well, because I was reminded of Paul when I read the line in today's gospel where Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are many rooms." Because Paulo himself narrated to me that one time he was invited by one of his classmates to have lunch with that classmate's family. And when he came back to jail, which he considered his home, his daddies and uncles in one cell surrounded him and asked him excitedly how it went and what it was like, because it was a new experience for Paul. And here is what Paulo told them. "You know, they have very small houses outside. Here, I have a big house with many rooms. There are very few people in their families. Just one daddy and one mommy. Here, I have many daddies and mommies, many uncles and aunties." So, I told them that I belong to a big, big family that lives in a big, big house with many, many rooms. Isn't that amusing? But you see, Paulo was somehow correct. Home, after all, is not just inside the four walls of your dwellings. It is rather wherever people can make space for each other, wherever people can treat each other with respect and care. Come to think of it, even if people are related to each other by blood, or even if they live together under one roof, if they hate each other, or spite each other, or treat each other with contempt, they will be like strangers to each other. They will not be family. Their house will not become a home. Is it not beautiful to hear of the many creative ways that families are now trying to sustain their connectedness to each other, even as we are all forced by this pandemic to keep a safe physical distance from each other, especially in the effort to keep the elderly and the vulnerable from getting infected? Are we not touched by the sight of couples and children and grandparents kissing each other while standing at the opposite sides of a glass window or a closed glass door? You know, I have 12 siblings dahil 13 kami magkakapatid. And none of my 12 siblings is into Facebook. But they literally transformed our Viber chat group into something almost like Facebook, doing all the sharing, commenting, liking, news updating there in our chat group. And my sister, who recently celebrated her silver wedding anniversary, by the way, we prayed for them 2 days ago. Well, when she celebrated her silver wedding anniversary, she prepared food. She prepared all the ingredients to a sumptuous meal in the province, in Pampanga. She managed to have all her pre-cooked materials sent to the house of another sister of mine through a delivery service with the instruction on how to put it all together, how to garnish it, adjust the flavor, and have it sent to another sister to another sister's house for repacking. Meanwhile, my brother's daughter already arranged with another delivery service where to have the repacked food picked up for delivery to the rest of us. And then, today, at lunch, we sent photos to one another of the same food, present on our tables, and gushing about the flavors that remind us of our late mother's cooking. That's family, beyond the physical distancing. Please, just one request to all of you who are following this Mass. Let us please stop using the word social distancing and switch to the correct terms, which is safe physical distancing, even while we try to remain close to each other in spirit. Because social distancing is about consciously putting up barriers from each other on the basis of religion, economic status, educational status, political convictions, etc. Why don't you try looking it up in your dictionary? It's a negative thing. Social distancing has a negative meaning. That's when we treat others as others rather than as neighbors. That's when we become intolerant of each other's differences and refuse to even enter into dialogue with each other. Kaya please, physical distancing na lang. There can be no community without communion, without the spiritual or social bonding, which we can still nourish even while we are physically distanced from each other by situations. There are many situations that distance us. For some people, it can be imprisonment, like the case or the situation of Pau. For other people, it can be war. For other people, it could be migration. And for all of us now, this pandemic. You cannot grow a community from every collectivity unless the people who have been brought together learn to open their minds and their hearts to one another, unless they learn to feel the joys and the sufferings of others as their own, unless they learn compassion and care. Brothers and sisters, Jesus is our model homemaker. He is the homemaker par excellence. He teaches us to treat every human being as a brother or a sister, not just those we are related to by blood. By teaching us to call on the same God as Father, our Father, He is also teaching us to treat each other as brothers and sisters. No wonder Jesus calls Himself the way, ang daan. Because He united divinity and humanity in Himself. In Jesus, God becomes permanently connected to humankind and humankind to God. He also becomes our strong link to each other as we call ourselves members of the same body of Christ. When we started our relief operations in the Diocese of Kalookan, there was one question posed to me by a parishioner. She asked, magbibigay din po ba tayo sa mga hindi Katoliko? Will we also extend assistance to the non-Catholics? And of course, I was surprised by the question. And I said, how can we not do so and still call ourselves Catholic? To discriminate against those who are poor, hungry, and in need just because they belong to another religion is the most un-Catholic kind of behavior I can think of. And so we don't knock at the door and say, Katoliko po ba kayo? No, no. It's every human being, every fellow human being in this kind of a situation who is in need of our help. Remember what we used to sing in church when we were much younger. You remember that song entitled, No Man is an Island. Let me quote it, but try to make the lyrics a little bit more gender sensitive and a bit more inclusive. Instead of saying, no man, maybe we can just say, no one is an island. And so the song says, no one is an island. No one stands alone. Each one's joy is joy to me. Each one's grief is my own. We need one another. So I will defend each one as my neighbor, each one as my friend.
No man is an island. No man stands alone. Each man's joy is joy to me. Each man's grief is my own.